and welcome to the last phase of the bustle period. This is video number 4 for chapter 14. I'm going to call this last look the shelf bustle. This last 7 years of the bustle period has a bustle that definitely comes back in the rear end of a woman's silhouette, but it's a little different. Instead of being soft and drapey, constructed of lots of fabric that's kind of plooped there, it is more horizontal. It protrudes straight out like a shelf in the back, and it's kind of like a combination of the upper body, the bodice area, being snug like the sheath bodice was, the sheath bustle silhouette was, with the prominence of a very hard and rigid looking bustle in the back. If you look at the picture here on the bottom right of this first slide, I think you kind of see what I mean. It comes out right horizontal from the waistline, and it's pretty flat, unless there's lots of layers, but it's pretty flat in the center front. The action is in the back, and for some reason these remind me of horses. That's what I think of. See if you agree. The bodices for this shelf bustle look are going to be several styles. We're going to have things that look like jackets again, that have like short tabs or peplums or basques, the tabs, or things that your textbook refers to as polonaise bodices, and also things that look like blouses as well. Variations on these themes, there's lots of different styles. Necklines, we're going to have high ones during the daytime, sometimes collars that are fitted and even flare out behind the head. Sometimes we will have squared and curved. You'll see a little bit of everything. Here are some examples of what I'm talking about. Do you see, especially in the picture on the right with the blue outfit, it comes, this is a wonderful profile shot. It's a drawing. Since this is a wonderful profile view, you can see what I really mean by a shelf sticking out horizontally. And that, to me, is what really makes this look. It's not soft and fluffy. It looks really rigid and sturdy. And can you see the upper body of these ladies? Their bodices are quite slim and tailored looking on top. This is what is referred to as a polonaise dress, and I think these are particularly hideous, but they were around, and the bodice comes down, and it's almost like a princess bodice that gets looped up, and reminiscent of the polonaise dress of the 18th century, but this is really ugly in my opinion. A lot of people equate this bustle style with this particular painting, and this is Georges Seurat's Sunday Afternoon at La Grande Jatte. If you're familiar with the musical Sunday Afternoon in the Park with George, this is the look of those really extreme bustles, and the lady in the right side of the painting especially. Here's an earlier depiction by an impressionist of a woman in a dress from right as we're turning from sheath into this shelf bustle, and hers looks quite soft, and we still see some action down around her knees, below her knees, but it's starting to stick out more in her posterior area. So this is kind of a transition look in a really fun painting. And here are some more, an example of an extant outfit. This on the right, the kind of tan colored outfit is actually wool, and you can see how, again, how horizontally that back end sticks out. This one has a particular little apron drape kind of thing in the front that drapes back to that bustle area. And if you look at the illustration on the left, you can again see all the different variations that they can get with an overskirt. But sometimes these bustle things in the back stuck out quite a bit, and sometimes they weren't quite as large. Here is an example of a princess dress. If you remember the princess line, this has no waistline seam, and this one almost looks like it's kind of a coat dress kind of deal. this dark burgundy velvet. And if you look at the collar on this, this is one of those examples of a historical throwback thing, that kind of a Medici Renaissance-y looking stand-up collar thing. Every once in a while you'll see a lovely homage to the past in this period. Here are two examples of princess line dresses as well, something more pastel and daytime looking, but you can see it isn't a bodice and skirt here. It is a full dress that's cut and fit over the body and over that shape that sticks out in the back on the left, and on the right it's almost like a fitted coat type thing with an underdress. And here's some outdoor garments for fall or winter. And you can see the one on the right looks quite, tailored and plain. And the brown one on the left has a fancy jacket and a bodice and a bunch of polka dotty overskirt. So, I mean, it could be fluffier and more feminine, or it could be a more tailored, but this, horizontal bustle effect is what I'm going for here. And of course, not everybody looked great in this. Here's our lovely Queen Victoria of Britain. She was a very short, very round woman by this time, and while she has got a bustle back there, it's kind of hard to tell where the Queen stops and the bustle starts. She was quite stout by this point in her life. So just know that when you look at pictures of real people, they don't always look good, and they very often don't look anything like the fashion illustrations. Here's a daytime summer version of this dress, or the silhouette, and you can kind of see in her back she's obviously going to perhaps play tennis in this. It's a very soft, lightweight fabric dress, but she still has got the bustle in the back. Now sleeves, usually tight, slim sleeves ending about the wrist. And one interesting thing that I want you to start to notice as we go through the years, these 7 years, is as we get closer and closer to the year 1890, we're going to start seeing a little bit of puff appear at the shoulder. And they're going to start calling that a kick-up, this puff at the very top of the shoulder. And what's going to happen in the next period, the gay 90s look, is that is going to develop into great, big, huge, puffy leg of mutton sleeves in the 1890s. Here is a picture from a Bloomingdale's catalog from 1886, and you can see day dresses, and I think one is more of an evening gown, evening wear there. But again, the silhouette, look at the silhouette, the horizontal protrudence of the bustle in the back, the slim lines of the bodice, the long, tight sleeves. 86, here is a catalog illustration for some walking costumes. These are meant to be worn outside when you're going somewhere. Oftentimes these would be wool or heavier fabrics. And again, lots of variations in the trims and the overskirts and all of that, but we've got the same silhouette. And here's another illustration from a catalog. A little bit of everything here. We've got a wedding dress in this style. We've got some very fancy day dresses. I love the picture of the light blue gown with the woman with her three-quarter back to us. Several things you can see on that illustration. First of all, what the kind of peplum or back, almost tails of that bodice jacket look like. And also, if you look at the top of her sleeves and a couple of these other ladies, there's a little bit of a puff there, which was referred to as a kick-up. 1885 and 86, some outdoor ensembles, some a little more practical than others. The ones on the right look like they're, vacation dresses by the seaside. We have our little parasols that go with the outfit. And they're a little, I like the tartan or plaid jacket that go with that skirt. Both of them have some sort of a drapey overskirt. The more elaborate dresses on the left illustration, there's a lot more fabric in these, a lot more fuss, and they also have parasols. But you can see some different lengths in these sleeves. Not all the time did they go to the wrist. The ones on the left, or at least that cobalt blue looking one, has 3/4 length sleeves, but then she's wearing long gloves with it to cover her hands during the daytime. And here's just an illustration of kind of a pea green silk satin existing dress from this time period. Not too fancy, but even still, you can see there's a rather elaborate patterning of the overskirt, and how it comes around the body and is pleated underneath asymmetrically. A lot of these were asymmetrical drapings on the overskirts, which is kind of cool. Kind of cool. If you look at catalogs or pattern layouts of some of these gowns, they could get really intricate in how these were all put together to be really asymmetrical but have lots of features to them. 86 and 87, some more variations on the theme. You can see in all of these the very horse-like, in my opinion, shelf bustle in the back, slim bodice in the top. Lots of different variations here. Here's an existing traveling suit from 87. This is wool, and it has kind of lace, or well, it's not really lace. It's more like braiding trim on it, and lots of buttons. It's quite nice, and has, again, that same kind of idea. And, of course, we have to have some tartans. These are 87. These are actually really not that complicated, but really, they did take up some room behind them. And here is something that's coming up in the 1890s. This is a little bit of a precursor, something referred to as a lady's tailor-made outfit. A tailor-made is a woman's suit, more of a jacket and skirt kind of thing, that has a lot of similarities in construction to the way men's garments were made, men's suits were made. And so many of these in early on were made by tailors, even though they were garments for women, and they referred to them as tailor-maids. And this is a page from an early catalog from Bloomingdale's, where you could actually order these through a mail order, your bits and pieces based on what your measurements were for different sizes. And usually these catalogs would have a much more elaborate size chart than modern day catalogs do, based on measurements. And you would order the bodice, and then you'd order the skirt, and you might order the overskirt, ploopy thing separate. 87, some walking dresses, again, more summer weight kind of things. And again, see all the different features, all the different ways you can make this same silhouette. So this period is a fabulous period to be able to design and work on for the stage. They can be really, really fun patterns and get lots of really neat design features in there. And here's an existing, lovely, striking, simple, but the trim on this is just gorgeous. The high contrast, a wool walking suit. And 89, okay, we're almost ready to turn into the gay 90s. You can definitely see especially on the kind of rust-colored dress, the puff or the kick up on the top of that sleeve. And then here's another, right at 1890, you can definitely see a puff beginning to be there at the top of the sleeve, and this is only going to grow in the next period. Evening dresses in this shelf bustle look. Same silhouette, more trim, more trains, shorter sleeves, more cleavage. By the late 1880s, sometimes you didn't even have sleeves at all. It might just be sleeveless or have like really thin, almost spaghetti straps instead of sleeves. However, not everybody went that brief. More conservative ladies would have longer sleeves. And it was also very common to wear long gloves if you did have bare arms on your dress, to not be totally bare. Here's a couple of photographs. This is a photograph of one of the mistresses of Prince Albert, Victoria's son, who was the Prince of Wales at this time. This is one of his mistresses. She was considered a professional beauty, and she had her picture taken, and people would buy like postcards of her picture to have because she was so famous and everybody thought she was so gorgeous. This is from 1888, and you can't really see her dress that well because she's kind of lounging on this chaise lounge, but you also get the idea of how snug this evening gown is around her bust and her waistline and her bare arms. And here's another evening dress. This isn't Lily, this is somebody else, but you can see sleeveless gown, and she's kind of mashed up her skirt. Shame on her. And you can see how the silk is getting wrinkled. That looks like silk taffeta to me, maybe with some silk satin. And, you can see wrinkles in that. Can you imagine ironing these? Oh my goodness. And then here are two fashion illustrations for evening gowns. Sometimes they could be pastel, sometimes they could be much, more intensive colors or patterns. But again, the silhouette with the shelf bustle in the back. And here's another one from 84. And you might also notice a lot of these fashion illustrations, I've kind of cropped out all the detail work. Much of it is in French in some of these, but this is an American one, and it says at the bottom, the newest French fashions designed for the Ladies' Treasury, which was a magazine, but having something that was French was very important. This is interesting because there is a woman not only in a pink fancy evening dress, but the lady next to her is in black, which makes you wonder, was this woman in mourning? Women still went to social events like dances and balls and operas, but they were required, if they were in mourning for a family member, to wear black. So it's very possible this young woman is in mourning. A few more dresses of daytime and evening, just to get the idea. And then there's some other things that occur during this 20 years of 1870 to 1890. There are some other categories of clothes. As we get more developed and have more technology and have more leisure time for the middle and upper classes, because we've got more machines doing things for us, there are some other categories of clothes, and one is kind of a general category that's referred to as negligee costumes. Now, this doesn't mean underwear. This means informal, casual, more casual. They don't look casual at all to me or to us, but it was referred to as more casual at home kind of wear. Sportswear, even for women. Women are now going to start participating in sports even more and have special costumes for that. And garments that were worn outside for outdoor wear. Let's just look briefly at a few of these. Negligee costumes. As I said, this is not sexy undies, this is informal clothing, what they thought was informal. And probably the most popular dress was kind of generically referred to as a tea gown. And these were gowns that ladies would wear at home if they were going to be just having other close lady friends in and not having, proper business associates of your husband's come by or whatever, if not some more casual kind of event. And the most interesting thing about these were supposedly these were worn not necessarily with a corset. So some of these are rather loose or full in the front and more like a really fancy robe and a softer dress rather than something that was really tight and fitted and stiff. Much softer in line than regular wear. And sometimes they look like a dressing gown or a robe with a softer dress. And often these would have big pleats in the back or something like, if you remember 18th century, the Watteau dresses or the sack-back gowns. There was kind of like pleats in the back and they would flow behind them. Many of these have a feature like that. And as time goes on, as we go through towards the end of the century and into the next, tea gowns that started out as being more of this casual thing get more and more fancy. Here's a few. This one from the 1870s, you can kind of see what I mean. There's kind of this brocade pleaty thing down the back of this tea gown. Now, there is still a bustle whether or not this woman would have to wear a corset. We don't see the front of this dress, but you can still tell she's wearing her underpropper. Here's an illustration for an early tea gown with a sack back. You can see it's kind of flowy in the back. It's almost smocky-like in the back. Still relatively fitted in the front of this black with flowers tea gown from the 1870s. And here's something that's, variations on a theme. If you study Victorian ladies wear, you would be able to determine, okay, what's a tea gown, what's a morning gown, what's an afternoon gown, what's a this, what's a that, what's a that, because there's all these different freaking categories. This was referred to in its description as a morning gown, but it's got a lot of the same features. It looks like a looser dress underneath, and then there's this velvet robe-like piece with this gorgeous, fancy lace all the way around it. And then here's the back of another one that's satin from 1880, and you can see it's been very carefully patterned to fit over her, what do you call that? Bustle, shelf bustle. And here's another one. I really like this one. You can see again the much more softer, loose gown with a kind of a robe over it. Not fitted. You could get away with not having a corset. Now, still, you would have lots of undergarments. You just wouldn't have a corset on underneath this. And this one, it's possible she doesn't have a bustle on, or if she does have one, I mean, okay, this is a mannequin, but the woman who would have worn this, maybe just something softer like a pillow type structure. And this one was made by a company in London that the store is still there today, called Liberty of London, and they're going to be known for something in the next section we'll talk about. But this is a very lovely pastel one, peach dress that you could see was full and then is kind of softly contained with a fabric cummerbund-like piece at the waist, and then has a robe thing out of peach satin on top of it. So there were also negligee items worn at home or in the boudoir, and often these things were items that ladies would wear as they were getting ready to get dressed, putting on their makeup, doing their hair, or at nighttime. Things that they refer to as wrappers, which are kind of like fancy dressing gowns, or something called a dressing sack. Let's look at that. Here's a dressing gown from 1886, a very lovely one that has that kind of a feature of that big pleat in the back as well. And then these are some dressing sacks. This was like a fancy jacket that a lady would put on over her clothing while she did her hair and her makeup so she wouldn't get it all mussed or hairy or powder on it or whatever. And these could be quite elaborate as well. But you would never welcome company wearing one of these. You might let your husband see you like this and your maids, but you would never let the public see you like this. And then there's sportswear, which is terrific. After 1870, women are going to be doing a lot more sports than they ever have before, and they're going to have unique outfits that are designed to supposedly permit more movement for these women doing these sports. And of course they would wear a certain kind of specific corset to go with it, and maybe an abbreviated bustle to fit with it. But they're not hitting the floor. They're shorter so that the women could move around, and there were special ones for tennis and golf and yachting, walking, roller skating, hiking, ice skating, all kinds of stuff. And here is an interesting sports corset that has some side laces on the sides that it does not look as restrictive as a lot of the ones we've seen that look like they could stand up on their own on a table. This one looks a little softer, and instead of lots of boning in it, it almost looks like it has cording in it to make it have shape, and then there's a way you can cinch it in on the sides. And here's a lady playing tennis in an abbreviated shelf bustle. And here's a shelf bustle, another lady playing tennis in this lovely pinstripe ensemble. And then here's some ladies from the 1870s playing tennis, and it's not apparent whether or not they have a bustle at all. These look like, tennis uniforms for some kind of a club or something, but I would bet there's like a little pillow in their rear. But can you see these are quite short off the ground, and the ladies are wearing higher ankle boots with them. Here's some ladies wearing riding habits in the 1870s, and since women had to ride side saddle, which is a real challenge. I don't know if you've ever seen a side saddle, but there's like this horn hook thing on it. You would put one leg and hook around that, and your other leg would be down, but both of your legs are on the same side of the saddle. And the skirts of these riding habits were constructed to look good once you're in the saddle. And when you see the woman standing in one of these things, it just looks all wonky jawed. The skirt looks wrong because they're made to look lovely while you are astride. And then here's a lady tricycling in the 1880s. A shorter dress. There's like a jacket and a skirt, while her husband rides around in this very interesting tricycle. And there are some ladies doing some boating activities, going sailing in their lovely shelf bustle ensembles. And here's a yachting dress from 1870. It's kind of a sailor theme, and the woman is wearing what's referred to as a straw boater hat, tipped to the front, but the bodice of this top, the collar of the bodice is a little sailor style collar on this. And we also went swimming, believe it or not. Now, the kind of swimming they did is not the kind of swimming we do. It's more like just splashing around. But there were specific outfits that ladies would wear during this time period to go bathing in the sea or in a pool or in a lake or at the baths or whatever. And their outfits were much more body covering than we would ever want to be. They had like trouser-like things or bloomer-like things that were worn with a skirt on top of them. So it's a skirt with pants and then a bodice. And stockings, wool stockings, bathing shoes, a hat, and it's just crazy. And as we go through this 20 years of the Bustle period, few things are going to start to happen. The bloomers are going to shorten up to the knee. The sleeves are going to get smaller and smaller, because these were all the way down to the wrist sleeves when we start on a bathing suit. And they're going to get shorter and shorter and finally get sleeveless. But it's absolutely ridiculous to try and actually swim in these things, because what would happen is you would go out, paddle around in the water, the wool would get, or heavy linen, would get full of water, and they'd be very, very heavy. And, it's not made for swimming. Here's a couple. These are a little later in, not right in 1870s, but you can see what I mean by the bloomer style trousers on the right, and the lady on the left, they're kind of straight cut and a little shorter, and these little ballet-like slipper shoes. And these are shorter sleeves, but it's like a little dress with pants to swim in, and a hat. There are a lot of outdoor garments in the Bustle period, and you could spend your career studying all of them. And as a matter of fact, looking at a photographic catalog, original photographs from Charles Worth's atelier in Paris from this time period, in the Costume Museum Library in Bath, England, are what got me really hot on this time period, because these outer garments could be absolutely fabulous. There were things that looked like jackets. They could be short or they could be long. But the most interesting thing is so many of them, not all of them, because there's some that are like capey things, but so many of them were patterned to fit close to the body and then fit over the bustle. They could be loose in the front or fitted in the front. They could be loose in the back, but many of them weren't. They were made to fit over the bustle. They could be long. They could be short. There were things that looked like ulsters, which were a belted coat with like a capey thing. And there were the women's version of a Chesterfield with a velvet collar. But let's look at some. Some of these were absolutely amazing. They could be velvet or fur or just gorgeous, embroidered. Some of them we just generically called mantles. But you can see the interesting sleeves with fur or with tassels and embroidery. These two things, the one on the dress form is not over a bustle, but you can kind of guesstimate how it would fit over a shelf bustle. And on the right is a couple different kinds of outer garments. Evening mantles, evening capes there were, and some of them were heavily beaded and gorgeous. This is a lovely photograph of a woman with an outer garment that has fur trim, and you can see how it comes in the back and then it kind of hangs on either side of her bustle instead of going over it, which is another cool thing that they did. I love this one. It's long coat-like thing with the like little short thing with a longer coat. Oh, that's just pretty. And then there was this thing that was called a dolman. It was semi-fitted, kind of capey coat thing that had wide-bottomed hanging sleeves, and that's kind of a throwback to the Middle Ages in a way. Could be hip length or all the way to the floor. Uh, but look for the sleeves. There's also cloaks, capes, things that look like little shawls, all kinds of stuff. Here are a couple examples of a dolman. The illustration on the left is a tan one with embroidery on it. You can see it's fit to be short over the back of the bustle, but has this wide opened sleeve. And then on the right, these two black ones. This was actually a dolman coat designed by the House of Worth, and it's belted in the back. And then you can see this is the back view on the far right with the long sleeves, and then there's a side view of what these sleeves actually look like. Quite Gothic looking, really. And here's a couple more shorter dolmans, and these suckers are embroidered with beads and velvet and fur and lace, and they're just beautiful. Okay, ladies' hair, 1870, 1890. The most common thing to do with your hair is to put a center part in the middle, pull it to the back. Sometimes they had bangs. Sometimes the hair would pile up on the very top of their head. Sometimes they would have some hanging downy curls. They use a lot of fake hair, and you could even buy fake hair through the catalog and get long switches of it or braids of it or buns of it, and people would order it, and to make their hair look even taller and bigger and fuller, they would add false pieces in. Now, when the collars on the garments are going to get higher in the back of the neck, they're going to start putting their hair not hanging down on their shoulders, but higher up on their head. Here's some photographs of different kinds of hairstyles in this 20 years. Some of them have more elaborate things involved with it. The one in the middle top, that lady totally has a fake braid wrapped around the top of her own hair because it doesn't even look like the color matches. The woman right next to her, I'll bet that is her own hair. The woman on the top right looks like she used the curling iron and frizzed her hair by mistake. It doesn't always look that great. And then this next slide is from magazines. Oftentimes ladies' magazines would have illustrations on how to style your hair in these different elaborate chignons and braid arrangements and ideas for how to dress your hair. And these are kind of interesting. Ladies' hats in this bustle period could be really elaborate or very plain, and they could perch them on their head or tip them to the side or tip them to the front, and of course they're secured with hat pins. There could be wide ones, but many of them were narrower or taller, smaller hats. They still have some bonnets around, but most of them are things that kind of perch on the top of the head. And for sports, where many of the sports activities had specific hats that the ladies would wear to go with their ensemble, similar to that boater straw hat that we saw on the lady in the yachting costume. Here are just a potpourri of different kinds of ladies' hats for this time period. Some of them, the bonnets, have ties to tie under the chin, but most of them are hats that would have been secured with hat pins. Some of them go higher than others. Here's another page full of different kinds of hats. And that's another, ladies' milliners was another occupation that women might have during this time period that got a lot of business because all of these hats were very unique. You could order ones through the catalogs, but many ladies would go to the hat shop and purchase a hat and have it trimmed out like they wanted it, what kind of feathers, blah, 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 and have it made more specifically for them. Oh, there's our boater, our lady in the yachting ensemble with her boater from 1870. Shoes during this time period. Well, we've got oftentimes stockings that are going to match the shoes, and they might be embroidered or clocked, as we called it. Either a solid color, often white, or sometimes a solid color with a fancy pattern embroidered on the outside. White was most popular for evening wear, and black or dark ones are going to gain in popularity to wear with evening gowns. Even if you have a lighter colored evening gown, to wear darker stockings was considered cool. Here is two photographs that show you some of the decorated stockings from this time period. The ones on the right are like navy blue with pink and rose colored embroidery or clocking on them. Those would face to the outside so that, the outer parts of your ankle would have the decoration. And the pair on the left is just a patterned stockings. The shoes started out kind of rounded toes, and they're going to get more and more pointy as we go through the period. The heels weren't super high at all; they're more medium. Daytime shoes often matched the dress if they were an upper class lady, but if you were middle or lower class, you would have a pair of leather shoes or plainer shoes. And evening shoes were usually white leather or white satin. Here is just a collage of different shoes and ankle boots from this time period. When you think of the term Victorian boots, this is one of the periods where they were very popular. The shoes are, if you look at the brown shoe in the center and then the pink ones with straps, those kind of look like 18th century shoes to me. But variations on these themes of leather and satin or fabric shoes with a little bit of pointy toes and a curved heel. If you look at the white satin boot bottom left corner, do you see what I mean by that curve in the heel there? That is lovely. Accessories for this bustle period. Oh my gosh, all kinds of gloves. Long evening gloves at nighttime, short gloves for when you're going outside, folding fans for evening events, muffs to go with your winter ensemble, parasols, boas made out of feathers or boas like, a big string of fur to wrap around your neck. Jewelry was more worn in the evening time, with the exception of maybe there are ladies' Victorian watches from this time period look like little miniature pocket watches that oftentimes would be pinned to a woman's bodice, and the watch face would be upside down so you could look down at your chest and see what time it was. Or pins. Pins were very popular. Brooches for the daytime. Oftentimes little ear bobs or earrings as well. Here are this is just a little catalog page with some ideas of accessories that ladies wear. Everything from little chemisette or tuckers that would go inside a neckline, to hankies, to purses or reticules, to slippers, to hats, all kinds of things. And many of these things could be ordered from a catalog or purchased in a department store. Okay, that ends the bustle period.